The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I want to carry on from where my colleague Phil Twyford left off, making the link between foreign buyers and affordability in the New Zealand housing market. Mr Speaker, the Labor Party position is that if you've got the right to live here, you've got the right to buy here. That's right. That's true whether you are a migrant who's just arrived a month ago with permanent residency or you're someone who has lived here forever. Sir, if you do not have the right to live here, we don't think you should have the right to buy here because we think that is having an effect on the price of housing. Sir, the experience around the Pacific Rim and London and other places that are sort of safe havens for capital in a turbulent world is that with the free flow of capital, unconstrained by local rules relating to home ownership, those flows of capital pump up the price of housing beyond the price that locals can afford to pay. So the effect of not having a control on foreign buyers of New Zealand land and with houses on it is that the housing starts to be priced not according to the means of New Zealanders to buy housing, but according to the deep pockets of those who are from overseas. Now, sir, there can be a debate as to how much the effect is from foreign buyers on prices, but there cannot be a reasoned debate that there is none. How much is the effect from foreign buyers? Sir, countries around the world are concluding that it is a material and substantial effect. Australia, they've moved to stop it. Canada, they've moved to stop it. Hong Kong, they've moved to stop it. China, they've moved to stop it. Huge controversies in London, in the United Kingdom. One of the reasons behind Brexit was that people can't afford housing in those large centres. Sir, in New Zealand, the evidence is pretty clear. You know, there are billboards that are put up periodically in Ponsonby Road, some of the most expensive billboard space in New Zealand, advertising real estate agents to list your properties with who are selling directly into China. Selling directly into China, they advertise their websites. Those billboards, sir, we can't afford them in the Labor Party. They cost many thousands of dollars each week to hire that billboard space for an advertisement. There is a lot of money being made in the sale of New Zealand houses to overseas interests. Another example, sir, we know that some of the people who, if you like, win the prizes for being the most successful real estate agents in Auckland are those that are servicing those markets. We've got instances of buyers from overseas coming to New Zealand and not buying one house, but actually buying many houses on the same day, some of them sight unseen. Now, sir, I make the point again that this is not somehow anti-Chinese or, as it used to be, anti-Japanese or anti-any other ethnic group. You know, I've been accused of those things previously when in respect of rural land I criticised American purchases, Swiss purchases, French purchases, and then when I criticised Chinese purchases in respect of Shanghai Pengjin's purchase of the Crayford Farms, it was then that I was accused of racism or xenophobia when I was making the same point every time, and that is that the market for New Zealand land assets, and in this case housing assets, should be a New Zealand market, not an overseas market. Sir, why do we need this law? Why do we have to make this clear that the government hasn't got the discretion to allow our houses to be sold overseas? Well, we know that the government has traded away our rights to do and place such a control as that under the Korean Free Trade Agreement. Korea retains the right to stop New Zealand houses being sold to Korea, but under the Korean Free Trade Agreement, the government agreed that we would never ban the sale of New Zealand houses to Korean people, notwithstanding that in the free trade agreement that had been agreed within the last year or two with Australia, South Korea agreed that Australia could stop Koreans buying Australian houses. So Sir, of course, the even bigger effect of that, Mr Chairman,
Honourable David Parker.
the even bigger effect of that is the flow-on effects into other trade agreements. Because under trade agreements, they have a clause that says, the most favoured nation clause, which effectively says if you do a better deal in a later trade agreement than in your original trade agreement, it flows through to the benefit of the earlier trade agreement. Now, the Labor government, of which I was part, negotiated the free trade agreement with China. I was in Cabinet, and I remember sitting in a policy committee, because I've been worried about these land issues for a long time, and I asked the question, have we retained the ability to control who we sell our houses to and change those rules? Annette's nodding her head. She was probably at the same policy committee. I can remember Helen Clark saying, we'd better check that. Officials couldn't answer it on the day, and so we asked officials to go away and check that under the Chinese Free Trade Agreement, we were retaining the right to change which asset classes we restricted Chinese people buying in New Zealand. And the answer was, well, China is retaining the right to ban New Zealand buyers of their houses, and under the Chinese Free Trade Agreement, New Zealand retained the right to ban Chinese purchases of New Zealand houses. Now, how did that change? Because of the most favoured nation, which is in just about all of our trade agreements, because the national government gave away, sold New Zealanders down the drain under the South Korean Free Trade Agreement, that provision flows through under the most favoured nation agreement to China. Now, that can be fixed, because I'm sure the South Korean agreement can be fixed if we had a government that wanted to, as evidenced by the fact that they have retained the right in South Korea to ban New Zealand buyers of homes in their country, and Australia got the same thing. So absolute ideological selling out of New Zealanders' interests, trying to curb the rights of a future government. But it gets worse. What's the biggest trade agreement in the world? The TPP. What did they do in the TPP? Notwithstanding the lesson that we thought we had taught the government, notwithstanding the fact that actually the Labor government is a pro-trade party, the National Party went further and in the investment protocols under the TPP said that New Zealand would not introduce new areas of screening, i.e. we would not ban the overseas buyers of New Zealand houses to Americans or Japanese or anyone else in the TPP. Sir, that is why we need this SOP, because this SOP amends the Overseas Investment Act to make it clear that the minister can't just wash his hands of the effect of New Zealand putting the best of our houses out of reach of New Zealanders, lifting the price of houses in a way that's unaffordable for New Zealand. Sir, if passed, this SOP closes that glaring hole in New Zealand's law and says that if you've got the right to live here, you've got the right to buy here, that it should be a New Zealand market, that we shouldn't have people from overseas who are the one percenters of the world, sometimes dirty money coming through that we've seen through the Panama Papers, that those sorts of people can't come here having some of it stolen money, whatever, that they cannot come here and outbid New Zealanders for a house. Houses are to live in. The people whose interests we should be serving most are New Zealanders. They are the people that the New Zealand government should be acting to protect, not foreign buyers who want to speculate, who want to move money to a safe jurisdiction, who want to have another investment class, who want to price New Zealanders out of our own homes. Sir, this government in this area most plainly prefers the interests of overseas people over New Zealanders, and that's why this provision is so essential if we are going to get the housing crisis in Auckland under control, because most of that purchase pressure is in Auckland, sir. Mr. Chairman, Korean Free Trade Agreement, Chinese Free Trade Agreement because of it, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. What more proof do you need that you need change in the underlying legislation? Because this Parliament should be telling the executive that in respect of these things, New Zealanders do not want to sell down the river the right of future governments to control who buys their houses. We've got the ability in this vote today to put that into law, and I bet you that the government will try and block it. They've already even tried to close down debate on the issue through Minister Woodhouse.
Julian.